Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling something really important today, something I know a lot of you have been curious about.
Yeah.
Communication in schools. You've sent us some fascinating material from a document all about educational management.
Huh.
It's called HPGD2203 Topic 7, 2.pdf. And it's got some really interesting insights about how principals, teachers,
And really anyone in a school environment?
right, how they all make sure information flows smoothly and everyone's on the same page. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, you'd think communication is simple.
Yeah.
But in a school environment, it can be surprisingly complex.
Right. So let's dig into this.
Yeah.
The source we're looking at starts by defining communication as
Right, yeah.
a process of sharing meaning through symbols to influence others.
That sounds kind of textbooky, though.
I know, right? It does sound a little jargony.
It does.
But stick with me.
Okay.
Because when you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Like, imagine trying to teach...
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, imagine trying to teach a kid algebra, but they only speak Spanish.
Okay.
Even if you break down the concepts super simply, if there's that language barrier,
Yeah.
understanding is basically impossible.
It is. And that's just one tiny example.
Right. And this document is highlighting how miscommunication in schools can lead to much bigger issues than, say, just a missed homework assignment. We're talking things like contradicted actions,
Oh, wow.
important tasks
Yeah.
that just fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
The source even mentions potential tragedies.
It's a good point.
Yeah, it really emphasizes just how high the stakes can be
Right.
when it comes to clear communication in a school setting.
Definitely makes you realize how crucial it is for those school leaders
Yes.
to really get it right.
To prioritize it.
To prioritize communication.
And it's not just about sending out those
Memo.
those memos, those announcements,
Yeah.
It's about cultivating this whole culture
Yeah.
where everyone feels heard and understood.
Right.
Like their input matters.
That's where you really start to see that difference between
Okay.
one-way communication, which is like a principal just giving orders,
Okay.
and two-way communication.
Where it's more of
that back and forth.
that give and take.
A real dialogue.
Right. This document's really emphasizing the importance of that.
It makes
Like
sense.
that two-way street.
When you have that open dialogue,
Right.
that feedback loop,
Yes.
that genuine collaboration,
Uh-huh.
you see greater accuracy, you see efficiency skyrocket,
Okay.
and there's just this much stronger sense of shared leadership.
Like everyone feels like they're part of the process.
Absolutely.
They have buy-in.
They're not just being told what to do.
Right. But let's be real. Even with the best intentions, things can go wrong.
Oh, for sure.
Communication can break down.
Absolutely.
And this document lays out 4 major categories of obstacles
Oh, interesting.
that can really mess things up.
I'd love to hear about these.
They call them semantic, psychological, physiological, and physical obstacles.
Whoa. Okay. That sounds pretty jargony, to be honest.
It does. So let's break it down, shall we?
Please.
So semantic obstacles, those are all about meaning.
Okay.
Like, think of it this way. If you have a principal
Right.
using super technical language or jargon in a staff meeting,
Yeah.
the teachers might be totally lost.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
It's like trying to read a scientific journal
Yeah.
when you haven't even finished high school biology.
Yeah. You're just not going to get it.
You're not going to get it. And then you have psychological obstacles, and those are like the emotional barriers to communication.
Right.
Imagine a staff meeting,
Yeah.
and everyone's super stressed about standardized testing,
Like anxieties are high.
Anxieties are through the roof.
Mhm.
Even if the principal is trying to give them really important information, it might just not sink in.
It's going in one ear and out the other.
It's going in one ear and out the other because everyone's so caught up in those feelings.
Exactly.
Right. So then we have physiological obstacles,
Interesting.
and those are kind of inherent to the individual.
Oh, cool.
Like, think about someone with a hearing impairment.
Right?
They're trying to follow a conversation,
Yeah.
but they're in this super noisy room,
It makes it almost impossible.
and it highlights the need for schools to be really mindful of these individual needs.
Absolutely.
And provide accommodations to make sure everyone has
Right. An equal opportunity.
like equal opportunity
That participates.
to participate.
Let's look at
Exactly.
the communication process.
Yeah. And then finally, we have those physical obstacles,
Okay.
those external distractions
Right.
that can really make communication tough.
Okay.
Picture a school assembly, and the microphone keeps cutting out.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Classic, right?
Yeah.
That's your physical barrier.
It really highlights how important it is to have a clear channel
Right.
for communication.
To make sure the message can actually get through
Get through
and be heard.
without those distractions.
And all of this
So these 4 types of obstacles
These 4 types of obstacles,
really give us a good understanding.
they're crucial to understand.
Yeah.
Because it helps us identify the specific challenges
Right.
that school leaders face
Yeah.
when they're communicating
Not
with
their staff.
with their staff,
With their students.
with their students, with everyone, really.
Takes that first step.
It's that first step towards finding solutions.
Exactly. So we know the problems.
Well,
Now, what are the solutions?
right. What can school leaders actually do
Yeah. What can they do?
to improve those communication skills?
I'd love to know.
I'm glad you asked. This document gives us some great starting points.
Okay, great.
And one of the simplest, yet most often overlooked, is using clear and concise language.
It sounds so simple.
So simple,
That's so important.
but so important. It's about meeting people where they are,
Right.
avoiding that jargon, avoiding that overly complex wording that might
Go right over their heads.
go right over their heads,
Yeah.
making sure the message is accessible.
Yeah, to everyone.
And the document also mentions
Huh?
considering the language abilities
Yeah.
and potential prejudices of staff.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Okay.
Because effective communication is about more than just
Oh, yeah.
delivering information, you know?
It is.
It's about building those relationships.
Yes.
Fostering understanding.
Absolutely.
The source talks about the power of active listening
Oh, I love that.
and two-way communication, like we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
That's where strong leadership comes in.
Yeah.
Principals who are really actively listening to their staff, encouraging that dialogue, welcoming feedback,
But creates
trust,
collaboration.
collaboration,
It sets the stage for a really positive and productive environment.
a positive school environment
Yeah.
for everyone.
And this focus on relationships
Uh-huh.
extends to staff management, too,
Staff management.
and team building.
Team building. Okay. The document really emphasizes the importance of that informal communication
Okay.
with empathy and respect.
Right. Using polite language, appropriate body language.
It creates that space where everyone feels
Yeah.
valued.
But valued, not just told what to do.
Exactly.
It's a more collaborative.
And a huge part of that
Okay.
is honesty,
Honesty.
transparency.
From leadership.
From leadership.
Okay, so imagine a scenario
Yeah.
where a principal needs to implement a new school-wide policy.
Okay.
How could they use these communication strategies
Yeah. How could they?
to get everyone on board,
To really get buy-in.
to get that buy-in?
Well, instead of just announcing the change, they could hold a staff meeting
Okay,
where they openly discuss it,
got it.
allowing teachers to ask questions,
Yeah.
to share concerns.
That's the two-way communication in action.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
providing additional resources
Like what?
like FAQs or maybe online forums for ongoing clarification.
I see.
It's about being proactive,
Uh-huh.
transparent.
Transparent throughout the process.
It's not just about telling people what to do, it's about bringing them along on the journey.
Exactly. And all of this
All of this.
is backed by research.
Research. Okay, tell me more.
The document cites several studies
Okay.
showing a strong link between
Between.
effective communication
Okay.
and positive outcomes in schools.
Like what kind of outcomes?
Well, one of the most compelling findings is that two-way communication
Yeah.
leads to more effective communication overall.
Okay, so two-way communication.
It just works.
Sure. Works.
It works better.
And what else does it lead to?
It also leads to more committed staff.
Makes sense to me.
If people feel like they're part of the conversation,
Yeah.
they're more likely to buy into whatever it is you're trying to achieve.
To be invested.
To be invested.
in the outcome.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, cool. What else does the research tell us? Well, there's research showing that open communication
Okay.
leads to better individual and organizational performance.
So it's not just about good feelings.
It's not just about good vibes.
It's not just about good vibes.
It's about tangible results.
It's about getting those results.
Absolutely.
A win-win.
A win-win for everyone.
Okay, what else? What else does the research say?
Another interesting finding
Yeah.
is that open communication actually reduces fatigue
Oh, wow.
and increases responsibility among staff.
I guess if you feel like your voice matters,
Yeah,
you feel more ownership over your work.
that's a great way to put it.
You're more energized. You're more engaged.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So all of this research really highlights that effective communication isn't just, a nice thing to have in schools.
No, it's not a luxury.
It's not a luxury.
It's a necessity.
It's a necessity
It's a fundamental element.
for success.
For suc-
Okay. So we've covered what communication is, those potential pitfalls, the skills that can make communication really effective. And the research that backs it all up.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
Me too.
But we can't forget that communication is constantly evolving.
Oh, for sure.
Especially in today's digital world.
Right. And this document, while insightful,
Yeah.
it was written a while ago.
It does feel a little bit outdated.
Well outdated, yeah.
When we think about all of the ways we communicate now.
But we communicate now. So many schools still rely heavily
They do.
on those more traditional methods.
And the most traditional method.
It makes me wonder, how can schools adapt
Right. How can they adapt?
to really engage everyone in this digital age?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. We're bombarded with information from all sides these days.
From every direction.
From every direction. So how do schools cut through that noise?
How do they make sure
How do they make sure their messages are actually heard?
that they're not just getting lost in the shuffle?
It's tough. And how can they use technology effectively
Yes.
while still maintaining those personal connections?
Yes. Those are so important.
Which are so vital in a school setting.
They're at the heart of it all.
They're at the heart of it all. So it's this balancing act
It really is.
between the old and the new.
Finding that sweet spot
Finding that sweet spot.
where you're using the best of both worlds.
Yeah. We'll have to think more about this, but for now,
Yeah.
maybe we save that conversation
For another deep dive.
for another deep dive.
We could talk for hours about this.
We could talk for hours.
Yeah.
But before we get too focused
Yeah.
on the future of communication,
Right.
we should acknowledge that even with the best strategies,
Oh, for sure.
there will be barriers.
There will always be barriers.
This document doesn't shy away from that reality.
It doesn't.
It really dives into a whole section
Okay.
on those barriers.
Barriers to communication.
To effective communication
That makes sense.
in schools.
Yeah, because even with the best laid plans,
Things don't always go smoothly.
and it starts by emphasizing the importance of creating
Okay?
a positive learning environment.
A positive learning
A
environment.
space where students can really thrive
Uh-huh.
and teachers can do their best work.
Yeah, that's the
Because
goal.
that's the ultimate goal.
That's what we're all striving for.
But, as the document points out,
Yeah.
several factors can get in the way of achieving that.
They can.
And one of the biggest is language barriers.
Especially in today's schools.
In today's diverse schools, absolutely.
You have students and teachers coming from such a wide range
Such a wide range
of linguistic background.
of linguistic backgrounds.
And that can be a real challenge.
It's a huge challenge.
Communication.
It's not just about speaking the same language.
No, it goes deeper than
It
that.
goes deeper than that.
It's about understanding those subtle cues,
Those nuances.
those nuances that convey meaning.
That can totally change the meaning.
Absolutely.
Right, and then there are cultural barriers, too.
Cultural barriers.
We have to think about.
We have to think about those.
Different cultures,
Different cultures has different
communication styles,
communication styles,
different norms,
different norms.
different values.
Totally. What might be considered polite
Right.
in one culture could be seen as super rude in another.
Absolutely.
And school leaders
They need to be sensitive
need to be sensitive to those differences.
to those differences.
Create an inclusive environment
Yes.
where everyone feels comfortable
Comfortable.
communicating in their own way.
Exactly, because there's no one right way
There's no one right way to communicate.
to communicate.
Right. And let's not forget
Oh,
about
this is a big one.
generational barriers.
Generational barriers.
We've got teachers from different generations,
Yeah.
students from different generations,
And each generation,
and each generation has its own unique
communication style.
communication style. Think about parents
Yeah.
trying to decipher their teenagers' slang.
I've been there.
I've been there. It's funny,
It is funny.
but it really highlights this
Yeah.
real communication gap that can exist
It can exist.
between generations.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, there are the environmental barriers we talked about earlier.
Right.
Noise,
Distractions.
distractions, interruptions, all of those things
All of those things.
that make it hard to focus
We've been hard to focus.
and communicate clearly.
Communicate clearly. Try having a deep conversation
Oh, yeah.
in a crowded hallway.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that.
No,
Definitely not ideal.
not the ideal setting.
Not the ideal setting for meaningful interaction.
Right. And then we have
Oh, yeah.
technological barriers.
Technological barrier.
In our digital age,
Yeah.
technology can be
Oh, it can be
both a blessing
a blessing.
and a curse
Then a curse.
when it comes to communication.
It's ironic, isn't it?
It really is.
We have all these ways to connect.
But we often feel more disconnected
More disconnected than ever.
than ever. It's a paradox.
It's a paradox of the digital age.
So those technical difficulties, internet problems, lack of access to devices
All of those things.
can hinder communication in schools.
Absolutely. And then there's the issue of
Yeah.
information overload.
Information overload.
We're constantly bombarded with messages.
It's overwhelming.
It's hard to know
Yeah.
what to focus on,
What's important?
what's actually important.
Right. And that ties into those
Oh, yeah.
emotional barriers.
It's emotional barriers.
Things like anxiety, fear, anger, stress.
All of those feelings,
All of those feelings can impact
they can really impact.
our ability to communicate.
Absolutely.
Think about a student dealing with a personal issue.
Yeah.
They might not be receptive
Right.
to feedback from a teacher.
It doesn't matter.
No matter how well-intentioned,
Malintentioned. Right.
those strong emotions can cloud our judgment,
They do.
make it hard to listen actively,
Yeah.
to express ourselves clearly,
Absolutely.
respond appropriately.
Right. It's a good reminder.
It's a good reminder that communication requires
Empathy,
empathy,
understanding,
understanding.
putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
we can't forget about
Oh, yeah.
those physical barriers.
physical barriers.
Like students or teachers with hearing impairments, speech difficulties,
right.
other physical challenges.
They might need additional support
They might need additional
to
support
communicate effectively.
to communicate effectively. Yeah. It highlights the importance of creating a truly inclusive
Yes.
learning environment
Learning environment.
that meets everyone's needs.
That meets everyone's needs.
So we've got language barriers.
We do.
We've got cultural barriers,
We do.
generational barriers,
Yeah.
environmental barriers,
We do.
technological barriers,
You've got all.
emotional barriers,
Yeah.
physical
It
barriers.
seems like a lot.
It is a lot.
Mm.
But the main takeaway here is that effective communication in a school requires awareness.
Awareness of these barriers.
Awareness of these barriers
Yeah.
requires proactive efforts to address them
And
and a willingness to adapt communication strategies
to adapt as needed.
as needed.
That's key.
Yeah, we've got to be flexible,
Flexible.
creative, willing to meet people where they are.
Exactly, because everyone's different.
Everyone's different. Everyone has different needs.
Absolutely.
And that leads me to an interesting thought I had.
Oh, okay.
You know, this document, while super insightful,
Yeah.
it does feel a little bit formal,
It does.
like kind of like a textbook.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
It gives us this great framework,
It does.
but it doesn't quite capture
It doesn't capture
the human element,
the messiness,
the messiness,
the spontaneity
spontaneity
of real-life interaction.
real-life interaction.
Think about those impromptu conversations in the hallway,
Oh, yeah.
the laughter during a class activity,
Uh-huh.
those quiet moments
Those quiet moments
of connection
of connection.
between a teacher and a student who's struggling.
Those are powerful.
Those are the moments
Yeah.
that often have the biggest impact,
Even though
even though
they don't fit neatly
they don't fit neatly
into a communication model.
into that communication model.
Right.
It's where relationships are built,
Where trust is established.
trust is established,
Where learning comes alive.
learning comes alive. Yeah. It reminds us that communication,
Yeah.
it's about so much more
It's more
than just transmitting information.
more than just words on a page.
It's about
It's about connection,
and connection.
empathy, inspiring a shared sense of purpose.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I think it's important to hold on to both
Okay.
those practical insights
Right.
from this document,
The framework.
the framework,
Mm.
and the understanding that communication
Right.
is this dynamic process.
It's a dance.
It's a dance.
Between the structure,
And the spontaneous,
the spontaneous, the
Yeah.
formal and the informal.
the head and the heart,
And the most effective communicators
the ones who can really make a difference.
are the ones who can navigate that dance
Yeah.
with grace, authenticity,
Grace, authenticity,
and a genuine desire to connect.
to connect with others.
Yeah. So a question for our listeners out there,
Okay.
based on your own experiences in schools,
Yeah.
what communication strategies have you seen that really work?
What's worked?
And what hasn't worked?
What hasn't worked?
What are those communication breakdowns?
And what lessons can we learn
What lessons can we learn
from those experiences
that might help us all improve communication in our own lives?
in our whole life?
Whether it's at work,
Yeah.
in our community,
In our community.
even within our families.
It's a question worth thinking about
It's a question we're thinking about.
because those principles,
Those principles of effective communication, they go far beyond the classroom.
They're essential for navigating all kinds of human interactions,
no matter where we find ourselves.
no matter where we find ourselves.
Absolutely.
So on that note,
Yeah.
I think it's time to wrap up
I wrap up
this part of our deep dive
this part of our deep dive.
into communication in schools.
We've covered a lot.
But there's always more to explore.
Always more to explore.
So we'll pick up where we left off next time.
Next time.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about the potential challenges in part 1.
Yeah, those barriers.
All those barriers to effective communication, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
You're right. There's so much to consider.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the research
Okay.
that's highlighted in this document
Okay.
about what actually makes communication effective,
I'd like to hear about that.
especially for school leaders.
Yeah, what does the research say?
Well, one thing that really jumps out is this emphasis
Okay.
on two-way communication.
That back and forth dialogue.
That back and forth
we were talking about
we were just talking about.
in the last part.
It's not just about, the principal sending out information or
Right.
giving orders. It's about creating space
It's about creating that space.
for teachers,
Yeah.
for staff,
Staff.
even students sometimes,
Sometimes, yeah.
to share their thoughts and ideas,
It's so important to feel heard.
to feel heard. And the research actually backs this up.
Oh, really?
One study found that principals who actively sought feedback from their staff
Okay.
were seen as way more effective leaders.
That makes sense.
If you're open to hearing those different perspectives,
You're going to make better decisions.
you're more likely to make those informed decisions.
Sure.
And another study found that teachers who felt like their voices were heard
Okay.
were more satisfied with their jobs
Oh, wow.
and more committed
More committed.
to their schools.
Wow. So it's not just good for school leaders then.
It's not just good for school leaders.
It benefits everyone.
That's good for everyone.
It creates a much more
Positive
and collaborative.
and collaborative work environment.
It's about creating that sense of teamwork
Yeah, absolutely.
and collaboration.
About working together.
Working together, yeah. And this document talks a lot about the importance of
Those
creating this shared
Yeah.
vision
a shared vision.
and working towards common goals.
Common goals.
And communication plays a huge role in that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's how you get everyone on the same page,
On the same page.
living in the same direction,
You need that clear communication.
Clear communication. The document actually gives an example
Oh, I like example.
of a school that was struggling
Okay.
with low student achievement,
Okay.
and the principal realized
Yeah.
that there was this real lack of communication
Uh-oh.
between teachers.
Look at the teachers, okay? They weren't sharing those best practices. They weren't working together,
Not collaborating
not collaborating
to help those students.
to help those students who were falling behind.
I see. So it wasn't just a lack of communication with the principal
It wasn't just top down.
Yeah.
It was also
amongst the teachers themselves.
amongst the teachers, yeah.
That's interesting.
So the principal decided to implement this whole new system
Okay.
where teachers would meet regularly
Okay.
to collaborate on lesson plans,
Okay.
to share student data,
Uh-huh.
to discuss strategies for improving instruction.
So they built in a system
They built in a system,
for that two-way communication.
not just between teachers and the principal, but amongst the teachers.
That's a great idea.
And the results were amazing.
Oh, wow. Tell me more.
Student achievement scores went up.
Wow.
Teacher morale improved.
That's great.
And there was this much stronger sense of community
A sense of community.
within the school.
I love that.
It's a great example
It is
of how effective communication can really make a difference.
a tangible
A
difference.
tangible difference in a school.
For sure.
And it highlights that importance of creating that culture of open communication.
Yeah.
Where everyone feels comfortable
Yes.
sharing ideas,
Sharing those ideas.
working together to solve problems.
Absolutely. You need that foundation of trust.
You need that foundation of trust. But, schools are busy places.
Oh, they are.
It's not always easy
It's not always easy
to find the time
to find the time
for these kinds of conversations,
to really prioritize communication.
to prioritize communication, right?
Right. And the document actually acknowledges that time constraints
Time constraints
are a major barrier
a major barrier.
to effective communication.
So what can schools do
Yeah, what can they do?
to overcome this?
Yeah,
How can they make communication a priority
when everyone's so busy,
when everyone's juggling a million things?
right?
Well, one suggestion is to build communication into the school schedule
was the schedule.
instead of just like adding it on
As an afterthought.
as an afterthought, right?
Yeah.
Make it a regular part
Make it a regular part
of the day
of the day,
or the weeks
the week.
Like maybe dedicated time
Dedicated
for staff meetings,
Okay.
maybe professional development sessions that are focused on communication skills,
Right.
or even just those informal check-ins
Those informal check-ins.
between teachers and administrators.
It's about making time for it.
It's about making time for it. And the document also talks about using technology
Oh, yeah.
to streamline communication.
Streamline communication.
Things like email,
Email.
messaging apps, online platforms.
All of that can help
They can help share information quickly
quickly,
and efficiently.
efficiently. Yeah.
It's a great point. Technology can be this really powerful tool
If used effectively.
if used effectively. But it's not just about the tools.
It's about the mindset.
Think about the mindset, right?
Right.
You need to cultivate this culture
A culture.
where communication is valued
Value.
and prioritized
Prioritized.
by everyone.
By everyone.
It's got to be seen as this essential part of the job.
Not just an extra thing to check off the list.
Not just an extra thing to check off the list. It should be woven into everything,
It should be part of the fabric.
part of the fabric. And that actually leads to another point this document brings up,
Okay.
the importance of clear communication channels.
Clear communication channels.
So what does that even mean?
What does that mean?
It means that everyone
Everyone.
in this school community
Okay.
should know how to communicate with each other effectively.
How to communicate effectively.
So it's not just about having, the tools or the time.
It's about knowing
It's about knowing who to contact
who to contact.
and how to reach them.
How to reach them.
Like, if a teacher has a concern about a student,
Okay.
they should know exactly who to contact
In the administration.
in the administration.
And
they should feel confident
confident.
that their concern
Will be heard
will be heard
and addressed.
and addressed. It's about creating a system where communication is clear
Clear, consistent,
and reliable.
reliable. Okay.
And it also means establishing clear expectations
Clear expectation
for communication.
for communication. Okay.
Like, what are those response times for emails?
Right.
Or what are the guidelines
Yeah.
for using different communication channels?
Different channels for different purposes.
When everyone knows what's expected,
Right.
it reduces confusion,
Reduces confusion.
makes communication more efficient.
More efficient. Got it.
So it's all starting to come together now.
It is.
Effective communication isn't just about talking more.
It's not just about talking more.
It's about being
Intentional.
strategic,
Strategic.
a system
Creating a system.
that supports open dialogue
Open dialogue.
and collaboration.
Hmm.
And that's what makes the research so valuable.
Yeah.
It gives us that framework for understanding not just what to communicate,
But how to communicate it.
but how to communicate it effectively.
Yeah, I like that.
It's like a roadmap
Or would that.
for building that school culture where communication really thrives.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. But the document also recognizes
Yeah.
that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
There isn't.
Every school is unique.
Every school is unique.
What works in one context
Might not work.
might not work in another.
You have to be flexible.
So you have to be flexible.
You have to adapt.
You have to adapt. So it's important for school leaders
Yeah.
to really assess their own communication needs
Their own needs
and tailor their strategies accordingly
to fit their specific context.
to fit their specific context.
Yeah.
But where do they even begin?
Where do they begin? That's a great question.
What are some practical steps
Some practical steps.
they can take to improve communication in their schools?
I'd love to hear some suggestions.
The document suggests starting with a communication audit.
A communication audit, what's that?
It involves gathering feedback
Okay.
from teachers,
Teachers,
staff,
staff,
students, and
parents.
about their experiences with communication
Okay.
in the school.
So it's kind of like
Like a temperature check
a temperature check
to see how things are going
to see how things are going.
and to identify those areas for improvement.
To identify areas for improvement.
And once you have that feedback,
Yeah.
you can start developing a communication plan
A communication player.
that outlines specific goals,
Oh.
strategies,
Strategies.
action steps.
Action steps.
That's like creating a blueprint
A blueprint
for effective communication.
for effective communication.
So what are some key things
Those are just some key things
that should be included in this plan?
I'd like to know.
Well, first of all, it should define
It should define.
the school's communication goals.
Like, what are they trying to achieve?
Like, are they trying to improve Teacher morale?
Okay, teacher morale.
Are they trying to increase parent involvement?
Parent involvement.
Enhance collaboration among staff?
Collaboration. Right, all of those things.
All of those things. And then it should outline the strategies for achieving those goals.
Okay, so how are they going to do it?
So are they going to implement, regular staff meetings?
Regular staff meeting.
Create a parent newsletter.
Parent newsletter.
Use technology to facilitate communication between teachers.
Lots of options.
Lots of options.
Yeah.
And then the plan should identify
Okay.
the key communication channels.
Key communication channels.
That'll be used.
W's.
So email, phone calls, face-to-face meetings, social media platforms.
So many different channels.
So many different channels. And it should include guidelines
Guidelines.
for using each channel effectively.
Effectively, right?
Like the plan might say that urgent matters should be communicated via phone call,
Okay, for urgent matters, phone call.
but general announcements could be sent via email.
General announcements, email.
It's about using the right channel
The right channel.
for the right message.
For the right message.
So the right people get the information they need
In the right way.
in the right way.
Yeah.
And finally,
Finally.
the plan should include a system
Okay.
for monitoring
Monitoring.
and evaluating those communication efforts.
Evaluating, okay.
So you're tracking things like, how quickly are emails responded to?
Okay.
Are you conducting surveys
The survey.
to gauge parent satisfaction
Satisfaction.
with communication?
So you're getting that feedback.
You're getting that feedback. And then you can make adjustments along the way.
It's an iterative process.
It's an iterative process. This whole communication audit and plan thing
Yeah,
seems super helpful.
it does.
But wouldn't it be kind of overwhelming for a school
Yeah, to try to do all of that at once.
to try to do all of that at once?
It would be.
And the document actually emphasizes that it's best to start small,
Okay.
to focus on one or two areas
One or two areas
for improvement at a time.
at a time.
So maybe you pick that biggest pain point.
The biggest pain point.
It came up in that communication audit.
Yeah, tackle that first.
Tackle that first. And once you've made some progress there,
Then you move on to the next thing.
you move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
It's about making those small changes
Little changes.
that are sustainable
Sustainable.
over the long term.
Over the long term.
It's a marathon,
It's a marathon,
not a sprint.
not a sprint. And the document also emphasizes the importance of involving everyone
Involving everyone.
in the process.
So it's not just like the principal's responsibility
It shouldn't just fall on one person.
to improve communication.
Right, everyone has a role to play.
Everyone has a role to play. Teachers, staff, students, parents,
They should all have a voice
they should all have a voice.
in shaping that school's communication culture.
That makes sense.
Because when more people are involved,
Yeah.
they feel more invested,
More invested.
and you create this sense of
Shared ownership.
shared ownership.
Shared responsibility.
Absolutely.
For making communication work.
For making communication work.
I love that. But how does a school actually know
Yeah.
if their efforts are making a difference?
How do they know if it's working?
How do they know if it's working?
That's a great question.
That's what I'm wondering.
And this document provides some helpful metrics
Okay.
for evaluating communication effectiveness.
Okay, what kind of metrics? What should schools be tracking?
Well, one important metric is the level of engagement.
Engagement.
So are parents attending school events?
Okay.
Are teachers actively participating
Actively participating
in staff meetings?
in staff meetings. Okay.
High levels of engagement show that people are interested
Interesting.
in what's being communicated.
And what's being communicated.
And they feel connected to the school community.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
What else? What else should schools be looking at?
Another key metric is satisfaction.
Satisfaction. Okay.
Are teachers satisfied with the level of communication
From the administration.
from the administration?
Are parents happy
Happy?
with the information they're receiving
From the school,
from the school?
you can use satisfaction surveys,
Okay.
feedback forms,
To get those insights
those insights.
into how people are experiencing communication.
You need that feedback loop.
That feedback loop to make adjustments
To make those adjustments
as needed.
as needed. And another important metric
Yeah.
is clarity.
Clarity.
Are messages being understood?
Are messages being understood?
Are there misunderstandings?
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation.
If people are constantly asking for clarification,
Right.
it's a sign.
That communication needs work.
Needs improvement.
It's improvement, yeah.
So clear communication isn't just about saying things once.
It's about making sure
It's about making sure
the message is received.
it's received
And understood.
and understood. And finally,
Finally.
schools should also track the impact
Okay.
of their communication efforts
Big impact
on those key outcomes.
on key outcomes. Okay.
So is it leading to higher student achievement,
Okay, student achievement,
increased parent involvement,
parent involvement.
a more positive school climate,
What about connecting
connecting those communication efforts
the tangible results?
to tangible results?
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot to track.
It does sound like a lot.
But if you're not measuring it,
Right. How do you know?
how do you know if it's working?
How do you know if it's working? It's a crucial piece
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
of the puzzle.
Okay, so we've talked about those challenges. We've explored some of the strategies.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
A lot of ground. What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Okay, key takeaways.
I think one of the biggest is that effective communication is essential
It's essential.
for a successful school environment.
It really is.
It's not just a nice to have.
No,
It's that fundamental building block
that fundamental building block.
for everything.
For everything.
From student achievement
Yeah.
to teacher morale to parent involvement,
It touches every aspect.
every aspect.
Yeah.
And another takeaway
Okay.
is that effective communication requires intentionality
Intentionality.
and effort.
Effort.
It doesn't just happen.
It doesn't just happen
It
magically.
doesn't just happen magically. It takes planning,
It takes planning,
it takes strategy,
strategy
and it takes commitment from everyone
from everyone.
in the school community.
Everyone has to be on board.
Everyone has to be on board. And finally,
Finally.
I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
that communication is an ongoing process.
It's ongoing. It never stops.
It never stops.
Mhm.
It's not about finding the perfect solution and then you're done.
It's about constantly.
It's about constantly assessing, adapting, and
This
improving
is about communication practice.
communication practices.
It's a journey.
It's a journey, not a destination.
And that brings us to a question for our listeners.
Okay.
Think about your own experiences in school settings.
As a student, as a parent, as an educator,
What are some examples of effective communication?
yeah, what's worked well
What's worked well? What are those examples
and what hasn't worked so well?
of communication breakdowns? What can we learn from those experiences?
Yeah, what lessons can we
So
learn
that might help us improve communication
in our own lives,
in our own lives.
in our workplaces, in our families, in our communities?
It's a question we're thinking about because these principles of communication,
Yeah,
they extend far beyond the classroom.
they do.
They're essential
Essential
for all kinds of human interactions,
for all kinds of human interactions,
no matter where we find ourselves.
no matter where we find ourselves.
Okay, so we've explored a lot.
We have
We've explored the research.
the research. We've uncovered some strategies
Some strategies,
for improvement.
but there's still more to discuss,
There's still more to discuss,
especially when it comes to
especially when it comes to
those modern communication challenges
those modern communication challenges.
facing schools today.
Join us for the final part
The final part
of this deep dive,
of this deep dive.
where we'll tackle those issues head on.
We'll be back.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into communication in schools.
We've covered a lot of ground already.
We have,
Those foundations of effective communication,
right?
all those challenges and opportunities, especially when we think about this digital age.
Right, because this source mentions
It does.
that a lot of schools are still kind of playing catch up
They are.
when it comes to modern communication.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
Schools often have limited resources.
Yeah.
And keeping up with the latest tech,
It's not easy.
it's not always a top priority.
It's not always a top priority. But it's not just about the technology itself either.
Yeah, it's not.
It's about adapting those strategies to engage everyone
Everyone.
in this world that's increasingly online.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge challenge.
It is a huge challenge.
Bombarded with information
From every direction.
from every direction these days.
So how do schools cut through all that noise?
Yeah. How do they make sure that their messages are actually reaching parents and students and the community?
How do they stand out?
How do they stand out?
Well, it's a balancing act.
It is a balancing act.
On one hand,
Yeah.
you have to embrace the power
They're
of all these digital tools.
Like what? Give me some examples.
So things like social media,
Okay.
school apps,
Little apps,
online learning platforms,
Right. It's about meeting people
where they are.
where they are, which these days often means online
Often means online.
in those digital spaces.
And these tools can be really effective, Well, they can share information instantly. They can reach a much wider audience.
Oh,
And they can even personalize communication.
So you can send out
You can send targeted updates to parents
about specific events,
about specific events.
reminders to students about deadlines.
Exactly.
You can tailor the information
You can tailor it.
to the specific audience.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
But here's where that balancing act comes in.
Okay.
Even with all this technology,
Uh-huh.
you can't forget about
You can't forget about
those face-to-face interactions,
Those personal connections.
those personal connections.
we were just talking about.
They're so important.
So important.
You can't build trust
You can't build trust
and relationships
through a screen.
just through digital channels.
So how do you find that balance?
You have to find ways to blend the best of both worlds.
Okay. How do you do that?
So maybe you use technology to
Yeah.
share basic information.
Like announcements, things like that.
Exactly. And then follow up
Follow up.
with face-to-face meetings
Okay.
or phone calls.
For more like complex issues,
So there's more nuanced conversations
or just to build those
to
relationships.
build those relationships
So it's about using each channel strategically.
strategically.
I like that.
And here's something else to think about.
Okay.
In a digital age,
Uh-huh.
it's not enough to just send information out there.
What do you mean?
Think about all the content we consume online.
Oh, so much.
It's overwhelming.
It's totally overwhelming.
So schools have to make sure their messages
Oh,
are engaging,
yeah.
relevant.
They want to stand out.
They have to grab people's attention.
They do.
So it's not just about posting, a boring announcement
On the school website.
on the school website.
You know,
Nobody's going to read that.
Nobody's going to read that. It's about finding those creative ways
To capture people's attention.
to capture people's attention.
Maybe using visuals, shorting short videos,
videos. Yeah.
even using humor to make the information more memorable.
It's about being memorable.
Absolutely.
Like you almost have to think like a marketer
In a way, yes.
because you're competing for attention
for attention.
in this digital landscape.
And it's not just about pushing information out either.
No.
It's also about
It's about listening.
listening to what people are saying back.
That's so important.
Social media can be a good tool for that.
It can.
You can monitor conversations,
Monitor conversations.
respond to questions,
Respond to questions, see what people are saying.
get a sense of what the community is thinking and feeling.
It's a valuable feedback loop.
It is a valuable feedback loop.
But there's a potential downside to all of this.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Something the document doesn't really address,
Okay,
but we have to think about it.
what is it?
The risk of information overload.
Ah, yeah,
We're already bombarded with messages.
constantly.
It can be so overwhelming.
So overwhelming. If schools aren't careful,
Their communication
can easily get lost.
lost in the noise.
Lost in the noise.
It's like the more ways we have to communicate,
Yeah,
the harder it is to actually connect.
it's the paradox of the digital age.
It is.
So what can schools do?
To combat that,
I think it goes back to
It's
being
right to-
strategic.
intentional.
Intentional, yeah.
With there's communication.
Instead of just blasting out
Right.
every piece of information,
Prioritize
prioritize and focus.
on what's truly important.
Maybe send fewer emails.
Fewer emails.
Use clear and concise language.
Clear and concise language.
Make sure those messages are going to the right audience,
Targeted.
targeted. And also create space
Create space.
for those quieter, more personal interactions.
Right, because those are the moments
Those are the moments
where you can really connect.
where you can connect and build relationships
Build those
that
relationships.
go beyond just exchanging information.
It's about finding that balance
That between the digital and the human,
between the digital and the human.
the efficient and the meaningful.
And it brings us back to what we've been talking about all along.
It all comes back to
Effective communication.
human connection.
Human connection.
It's about connecting with others.
On a human level.
Absolutely.
And that's something that will never go out of style,
It won't.
no matter how much technology changes things.
It's timeless.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
This deep dive.
I think we've uncovered some great insights
We have.
that can be applied in all areas of our lives.
In all areas of our lives.
Not just in schools.
Not just in school.
We've explored those foundations of effective communication,
We have.
the challenges and opportunities
Of this digital age.
of this digital age, that balance between efficiency and meaning.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
You've learned.
That clear communication
Clear communication is so crucial
for strong relationships,
for strong relationships.
a positive school environment,
A positive learning environment.
and achieving goals.
Shared goals.
Shared goals.
It's about working together.
But most importantly,
Most importantly,
we've been reminded that communication is about connecting
Connecting with others.
on a human level.
On a human level. And that's a great note to end on.
It is a great note to end on. So until our next deep dive,
Until next time,
keep those conversations flowing
keep those minds curious.
and keep exploring this fascinating world
This fascinating world.
of human communication.